Peace. Part 2. Victim, Survivor, Thriver. My experience with trauma. So I left off part 1. Um, my grandmother, my grandmother had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I moved back home to be with my biological mother. Very short time. Ended up having another incident with her and being out on my own, homeless for a very brief period, 2 weeks, felt like years, um, and then ending up with living with one of my friends and his family and his mother. Um, but in that situation, I had to support myself, and I had to support myself um, in any way I could. It wasn't a free ride living there. Um, but there was a lot of freedom. There was a lot of freedom, and my friend's mom, she had 9 kids, and my friend and I, he was the youngest in his family. I was the youngest in mine, and by the time that he came around, she had already, his mother had already seen it all, done it all, been there, done that, and she had a rule that you guys are going to do what you're going to do, but do it in the safety of the home. I don't want any calls from the police department or the hospital, or if you're going to do something, you're going to do it in the house. So it was game on, game on. Um, but going to how that I was in survival mode, and I felt I had to do what I had to do to support myself, food, clothing, participating in supporting myself in that household. Um, and it was in a suburban, just outside of the city. It was in a housing project, and there was a lot of booze and a lot of drugs, and there was a lot of I'm gonna there was a lot of um, occasions where you could make money very easily um, in that neighborhood. Um, Quick money, getting into certain illegal lifestyles, and as I mentioned, I did whatever I had to do to support myself, and having the booze and the drugs arrive at that time, 15, 16 years old. um, you know, in retrospect, it was a blessing. It was a blessing, in retrospect, oh, how can you say that? Ultimately, I have, an addictive personality, and I've been sober for a while. But at that time, given the circumstances and the experiences and what have you, the alcohol came around and gave me a sense of peace. Um, a sense of being comfortable in my own skin, and getting into certain lifestyle behaviors to support myself. It was a good anesthesia to forget and to be like I had a sense of right and wrong, and there was definitely that inner battle going on, as far as how was I supporting myself, and the booze wiped that clean. I didn't have to think about what I was doing. um, it took down the inhibitions, and honestly, any f's to give. um, I didn't have any left to give. um, so into that lifestyle of survival mode, but like kind of a sex, drugs, and rock and roll mentality. Um, Now, coming from the place of the abuse that I experienced, I wasn't consciously aware. I wasn't consciously aware of projecting. I wasn't interested. I wasn't particularly interested in finding a girlfriend. I was in survival mode. I wanted money and security. I wanted to feel safe. I wanted to feel that my needs were being met. Um, but clearly, subconsciously, I was projecting an energy that only certain types of women picked up on. Let's just put it that way. And by the time I was 16, I had a mainstream job working at a fast food restaurant, but I was making all my money. It made it look good to have a job. Well, where's Scott getting all his money? Well, he works at the fast food restaurant. That's not where my money was coming from. But this projection, this subconscious projection, attracting unknowingly, consciously unknowingly, attracting certain types of female energy into my life, um, that represented my mother. And by the time I was 16, there was a small group of, and I'm not even going to say they were friends. They weren't friends. They were customers and they were clients. Um, but that goes to the female interactions that I was having at that time. And one of my customers, same age as I was, he was dating a girl, and we hung out, and I met his girlfriend's mother. And she was considerably older. I was 16, and she was 35, somewhere between 35 and 40. And it didn't take long. As I had no F's to give, man. I was in survival mode, and here's this much older woman, um, giving me attention. Didn't know any better. I'm 16. How many of the decisions that we're making at that age are based in healthy choices? At least in my experience. So I proceeded to have a relationship with this much older woman throughout high school, and honestly, I was praised for it uh, among my peers in high school. When the other guys in high school found out, oh, he's the one that's going out with so and so's mother. And then even the female attention that I got in high school from my female classmates was, um, outwardly there was a certain level of how disgust, and I'm like, whatever. But in private, yeah, privately they would express affection and attraction toward me, as if to yeah, out of curiosity, what is it about Scott that makes him attractive to an older woman? So I got a lot of negative attention, sexualized negative attention. Not that I acted on it, but it was definitely projected at me from my female classmates, and then from the male classmates and peers. It was like a pat on the back, attaboy, uh, you know, having, or a relationship with an old, it was a distorted sense of respect that, in retrospect, very uncomfortable. But seeing the deception, or not deception, but the distortion in how sex and sexuality and relationships are perceived from a male point of view, from a female point of view. Um, which leads, so throughout high school, by the end of high school, 17, 18 years old, it was April, May, June before graduation from high school. Through a series of events, my biological mother found out about this ongoing relationship with this adult woman and called the police. What statutory rape of a minor, all this other stuff. So that relationship, and it was really kind of ironic from my perception that here's my mom defending me from this other older woman. Anyway, that ended the relationship. She was arrested. The woman that I was involved with, she was arrested, and it was felt that somebody really needed to keep a close eye on me. And one of my older sisters, I have four older sisters, I'm the youngest, um, lived and worked in Manhattan. So the woman that I'm involved with, she's been arrested. There's what's the word I'm looking for? Restraining orders against her. You can't go anywhere near him. You, Scott, can't go anywhere near her. Blah da 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 da, whatever. And it was in the newspaper. It was in the newspaper. Um, and it was embarrassing, I guess, from my perception. But again, there was that there wasn't the awareness that we have nowadays about child protective services. And um, anyway, I feel like I'm digressing. My older sister, knowing this situation I was coming out of, she lived and worked in Manhattan. And she was aware of a job opening um, at a yacht club off of Long Island. I was living in Massachusetts. She was living in Manhattan. She made this connection for me to get me out of the area, to give me some respite, to give me a new environment, to and her heart was definitely in the right place. I love my sister. She's an awesome person. We don't necessarily see things eye to eye, but she's been a constant in my life. And um, so anyway, she gets me this job working at a yacht club. And the job itself was a water taxi. I would go out to the yachts and pick up these uber wealthy people off their yachts and bring them into the island and the yacht club and the hotels and their homes, their private beach homes, and very exclusive community. And on this very small island, now here goes to the cycles and working out my cycles, where my abuse had affected me on such a internal level that I was manifesting a repetition of cycles in my relationships with everyone, and completely unaware, subconsciously, outwardly. Here I am, I'm working at this yacht club, making decent money and having a good time. Whatever, work hard all day and party all night. The booze and the drugs were still very much part of my daily life. And on this particular island, very small, um, there were two bars, nightclubs, hangout places. Um, One was for the yacht club people, and the other one was for the employees of the island. And the twain shall never meet. Clearly, if you were an employee and you went to that other bar, they'd tolerate you, but they'd let you know that you weren't, hey, there's the other bar if you want to go. Now, however, that rule didn't apply to the uber wealthy people coming to slum at the other bar where the employees and the workers on the island would hang out. And here goes into my cycle, into my distorted perceptions and projections, um, being in the whirlwind of my victimhood and perpetuating that. So I'm at this employee bar, um, one night and having a couple of drinks by myself, flying solo, and in walks a very well put together, what I would later come to term as a uber wealthy, somebody's trophy wife comes in to slum it. I think we're familiar with that, slumming it. Um, and sure, we strike up a conversation. One thing leads to another, and she's married, and we had a sexual experience, one night stand, if you want to call it. And that continued on. Um, that continued on, and she at one point, and there's no other way to put it, but and I laugh about it, but it's sad. It's sad that's where my I had become a sex worker at that point. I wasn't aware of it yet, but it was going to manifest very quickly, very quickly. Um, to express her thanks and her gratitude, or whatever you want to call it, I began finding myself with new clothes and money and what have you. And she said, I have an idea. I have a couple of friends who might be interested in meeting you. Sure, why not? And then come to, basically what was happening was is I was allowing myself to be passed around with these uber wealthy trophy wives. Um, and from my distorted perception, I thought I was just doing really well, as far as my from a financial standpoint, from a love life standpoint. I thought, but in truth, what was going on, as I'm sure you can see, I was being passed around and I was being kept, and I had become a sex worker, and I was spending a night with this one, spending a night with that one, spending a night with this one, and there was numerous. Now, you may perceive this as sexual behavior, but in retrospect, I look back on that. Um, I don't include that time in my life as a intimate sexual. I don't perceive those experiences as intimate sexual relationships. From this perception, I was doing a job. It may sound whatever. But that was the general idea. There was no emotional, intimate attachment. I was performing a service. That's it, man. But there was an observation that I believe is very relevant, and virtually in each one of those situations with those individual females, there was a commonality of they were married. These were married women with very wealthy husbands, and the commonality between them, they couldn't, and this is almost verbatim, virtually each one of them in their own way said the same thing, that I could never do this with my husband. I could never do that with my husband. What I experience with you is, and basically what they were saying, they didn't feel, they could not express themselves sexually with their husbands. Really threw me for a loop about marriage, and that, their relationships and their marriages were for convenience, title, financial security, etc. But there was no intimacy or connection, especially as it pertained to their sex lives. They could not, or they did not feel comfortable, or they felt oppressed by their mate or their spouse to express themselves sexually. It was an interesting perception about the dynamics of male female relationships, and just perceiving them as, yeah, there's my, I don't know, you probably hear that, my dog's barking, or not barking, but so I should, here we are. I'm going to leave it at that. Um, and this will be part two. I'll move on to part three, and how many ever until we get to the resolution, or the part of my story, and my experience where I found uh, thriving and loving and living and existing from a point of compassion, empathy, self forgiveness, forgiveness of others. And I'll be back very shortly. I'm going to bring him out for a walk, and him, my dog, Jake. And I'll be back for part three, and we'll see if we can wrap this up. I'm really glad you're here. I'm really glad you're here. Thank you for, I admire the courage it takes to click that button. So thank you. Thank you for sharing this with me. I'll be back, part three. Peace that surpasses understanding, part three coming up.